15.
It's quite scary, this event. Last time I was here, I was about to go on, and one of the organizers said, you know, what are you going to talk about? And I told her, and she said, do you think that's interesting? And I went, I suppose we'll find out in about 5 minutes. And she said it with, of course, love in her heart, but my heart went to my boots. So I thought I thought about the theme, marginalisation, and it sort of applies pretty much to everything that I've ever been involved in, so I'll just tell you a story. Okay, and I was aware last time of how I completely lose track of time when I'm talking, so I have no idea how long I talked for last time. I'll try and make it 15. This is a story about Poland in 1978 and the town of Krakow. I was in a group called The People Show, which was a performance art group, and had spent the last 8 years touring various parts of the planet, doing wacky, crazy shows to people in wacky spaces. And we were invited by the Polish Students' Union organization to come and do a tour of Poland. We kicked off our sort of journey in an incredibly opulent festival in Nancy, with amazing food and good-looking, fashionista, sophisticated people, and got on a train for I think about 36 hours, got off in Warsaw, and we were picked up in a cattle truck and taken to a student housing place on the outskirts of Warsaw with communal cold showers, and that was the beginning of the tour. So it got worse and worse in terms of, I mean, by our decadent bourgeois standards. I remember one night waiting for 3 hours for a bowl of spaghetti bolognese in, they said, the best restaurant in Warsaw. And it came what we would call sampler size. And it was about 4 mouthfuls. And then we said, could we have seconds? And they said, no. And then there was this crazy run round one bar after another. Each bar would run out of beer, and then somebody would run in and go, and then everyone would run to the next bar and you'd follow them. And the only place we discovered you could get a drink was on a train, and the trains were full of alcoholics. And so we ended up in this tour in Krakow. Now, at the same time, there was an incredible, powerful political movement going on, and in fact, we arrived there in the strangest atmosphere I've ever known. All the telephones were cut off, foreign newspapers were suddenly not allowed in, and because we were the students group, we somehow got in. It turned out that the security forces had just killed a student, and there was a big, big clampdown going on around Krakow. They showed us to our quarters, which were so awful and so far out of town that we decided to actually throw in the towel and go home. And I conveyed this idea to them. And then they said, hang on a sec. They went into a huddle, came back, and remarkably then, in the cattle truck, drove us to the equivalent of the Four Seasons Hotel in the heart of Krakow and said, how about this? I'm still puzzled by the choice, but apparently it was okay, or they'd had a phone call with someone. So we checked into this hotel. It was a wonderful old luxury hotel. The lobby was full of very fat, rather kind of scary-looking businessmen and very young, blonde women who often then went upstairs with these rather squat, ugly men. But in the course of one of the evenings there, we met two Polish musicians who were incredible. It was a bass player and a drummer. And in the show that we were doing, I, at the end of the show, played a little bit of trumpet. I'll come to that. And we started drinking with these musicians, and they started talking about jazz and how they listened to American Forces Network radio and how they loved John Coltrane. And it seemed they were incredibly well informed and the real thing. So in a moment of drunken sort of kind of friendship and generosity, I said, well, why don't you come and jam with us tomorrow night in the show? And they said, we would love to do that. I said, unfortunately, I can't play you what we're going to be playing because I was using a backing tape, but it's in the key of G, And it's a minor blues. It'll just be G, C minor, and D7. And he said, got it. And I sort of sang the bass line to them. And they said, perfect, we'll be there. The gig the next day was in a massive civic auditorium, and we discovered at the last minute we were sharing the bill. This is a 5-person experimental English theatre group. We were sharing the bill with the Red Army Ensemble, who were on a tour at the time. And we were also sharing dressing room with the Red Army Ensemble. I expected a sort of the army word being the key thing, but in fact it was more like the Kirov ballet in special clothes, and they, men and women, and they were really kind of diva-ish, and we shared this dressing room with them, and they were on first, and they'd wheeled in thousands of school children, which I thought wasn't really such a good idea for the people show. Our stuff tended to be quite sort of smutty and rude and dirty, and messy. Anyway, the Red Army Ensemble went out and did their thing, and then we were on second, and they all stayed for the British cultural contribution. And so the show we were doing, just to give you a bit of background, was based on Tennessee Williams' memoirs. And the particular image that the show ended up with was, because Tennessee was very obsessed with his sister Rose. Rose was played by an incredible Dutch mime artist called Will Spoor in drag, playing Rose with a blonde wig. Rose was a chain smoker, and she also was mentally ill, so she ended up in hospital for most of her life. The image was Rose is in the middle of a circle. The circle is created by maybe 40 wine glasses. In each wine glass is a red rose, and in each red rose is a lit cigarette. At this point, I'm playing the part of a DJ. At the end of the show, I come down from my booth and I smash a glass, I go into the circle, and that's when I was going to play my trumpet. Now, a technical note. In all the spaces we'd done the show in, which were much, much smaller, in order to make a theatrical moment for the trumpet, we'd thrown a long piece of thin rope over a beam. There was a butcher's hook on the end of the rope, and on the end of the butcher's hook was my trumpet, and we'd run that to the side of the stage. Our technical assistant on the Polish tour was a girl called Elena, who was really grumpy. And now I understand why, because I'm sure being on tour with the People Show would make anybody grumpy, but she never smiled. She spoke very good English, which is why she was with us. And so I said to her, okay, Elena, when I smash the glass and I go into the circle of smoking cigarettes, I will do this. That will be your cue to release the rope and very carefully bring it down so it just falls into my hand without me even looking, at which point I will pick it up and I'll play this very poignant blues in the key of G minor. And of course I've now got the bass player, the drummer we couldn't fit in, but the bass player had been sitting through the entire show. It's about an hour in the show now, and he's sitting with his double bass on a stool just off the main lit area, waiting for this moment of a blues in G minor. So everything's ready. The big difference was that the building in which that would be fit for the Red Army Ensemble was massive. I mean, the ceiling was maybe twice the height of this. So we had to get extra string, obviously, to get a huge ladder, get it over there, put the trumpet on the end of the butcher's hook, and then run it all the way to the wings where the grumpy Elena was waiting for the cue. So everything had gone really well, except that from my advantage of the DJ booth, I'd look down and I'd see these thousands of school children just looking up with a kind of, what the fuck are they doing? It was, I mean, if you just sat through the Red Army Ensemble with all that kind of like kick in and sort of absolute precise movement and very stirring kind of music, usually in a major key. They were, I mean, I don't think they were bored, but they certainly were puzzled. And anyway, so we got to the moment. I primed the tape recorder with the backing track in G minor, and I made my way down to the stage. I entered the lit area, and I smashed the first wine glass with my booted foot. And then I smashed the second wine glass. And then I went in, so it's just me and the drag artist playing Rose in now the broken circle of smoking cigarettes. And my moment came. So I did this. At which point, Elena unhooked the rope and let go. Apparently, it came down at some speed, and it hit me on the head and rendered me unconscious. So I was lying on the stage, and as I came to, still with this very mellow G minor blues, you know, it was kind of like a tango. It was like a boom cha cha boom cha boom, that kind of a feel. And I remember, as I came to and focused, looking down at the audience again, and thousands of school children going, "Wow!" Like that was probably better than the Red Army Ensemble. How do they do it? And then the part of me that exists in dream state, which is, you know, anyone who's ever been on stage or had to make stage appearances will always say the same. Your nightmare is you get there and you've got the wrong clothes on, or you haven't got the right tape, or I still have those dreams, and with good reason, because that sometimes happens. And so I was lying there and thinking, and I could hear the bass player kind of boom, boom. And he's waiting, you know, and I hadn't. So, and time stood still, as they say. And so, lying there, I thought, I have to do something. Now, luckily, when we'd done the rigging with the string and the trumpet, of course, you tie it off at a certain point. So if Elena had done her job properly, she would have got to the end of the rope, and it was tied off somewhere, and it would have been at that height. Unfortunately, not that height, but this height, so just enough to, you know, hit you on the head. So in fact, it hadn't hit the ground, it just hit me. And as I sort of looked up, I could see it, and of course, you think of the length of this piece of string, making this monumental arc across the stage, you know, passing over my head at regular intervals, actually. So I thought, I'll make a plan. And part of the experience of being in an experimental theatre company is that you're constantly having to readjust. I mean, for example, another time on a tour of the former Yugoslavia, I remember explaining the lighting cues to the guy who was doing the lights in the church hall, who didn't speak any English at all, but he spoke a little bit of Italian, and one of the members of the group was Mexican, so it was thought, oh, they can communicate with each other. And so Jose Nava then translated the lighting cues into sort of pidgin Italian and so on. And I remember we started the show, every cue was governed by a lighting or a sound effect or something like, and the lighting guy basically went through the entire cues for the entire show, one after another in the first minute and a half. The final cue being blackout, you know. So, you know, I was used to the idea of improvising and adjusting. So anyway, I'm lying semi-comatose with the trumpets flying over my head at regular intervals. I mean, big intervals, we're talking like, you know, maybe 5 seconds or something. So there's time. So I thought, okay, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to pretend that this was part of the show, and I'm going to time it so that when the trumpet comes back over my head, I'm just going to stand up and grab it. And it's going to be like dynamic, and I'm going to pull back the lost ground that I now find myself in. So I waited a couple of times, and I sort of did kind of performance movements, as opposed to I'm sort of semi-conscious and I want to go to the hospital, and I don't know if I've got brain damage, but so turn it into a kind of theatrical performance art move. Do you know what I mean? There's like a certain way of moving in performance art that actually says, I meant it. And sure enough, and here it comes, and so at that moment I dynamically stand up, at which point dynamically the miserable Elena has obviously realized she's majorly fucked up. And so she chooses that moment to grab the string and pull it up. So as I stand up to grab the trumpet, it arcs, but it goes right over my head. You know, like, and I look like a complete and utter prat because I'm now trying to jump up and grab my trumpet, and it doesn't look performance arty. It just looks like a fuck up, you know. So, you know, I have to resort to the, you know, basic shouting, Elena, for fuck's sake, Elena, and she's like this, and I'm going, hello, Elena? Yeah, could you bring the trumpet down, please? Just bring it down. And so she goes, okay. You know, like, why is he so upset? You know, and she brings the trumpet down. And I look at the bass player, right, this is our time. We're now pretty much halfway through what should have been a beautiful, poignant trumpet and bass duo. And so I give him the nod, and the trumpet slowly comes down, and with really no finesse, I take it off the hook and bring it to my lips, at which point I discover that in the kind of accident, let's call it that had just occurred when it hit me on the head, the mouthpiece had also come out of the trumpet and was nowhere to be found. I don't know if there are any trumpet players in the audience, but you can't actually play a trumpet unless there's a mouthpiece stuck in the end. So now, in front of like 5 trillion Polish schoolchildren and probably the Red Army Ensemble watching from the wings, and I'm standing there finally with the trumpet in the smoking circle of Tennessee Williams, roses and cigarettes, with the trumpet, and that thing of like, well, there's a trumpet. You know, I mean, and I also have an option. Do I get on my hands and knees and start looking for the fucking mouthpiece? No. I mean, you know, it's over. You know, the track actually is almost over. And I look at the bass player, and he's sort of like, dum, dum, dum. And I'd say that was a moment of marginalization for me. Thank you.